Thank you very much, Sarah. As mentioned, I am going to talk about mentoring today. It's already come up, so I'm delighted to see that other people share my enthusiasm and passion for how it can be a catalyst for change. The agenda for what I'm going to take you through is, thank you, a bit about me, a bit about my background, why there is still a problem and how mentoring can resolve some of that. Talk about classic mentoring and also reverse mentoring, which is something that some of you may not have come across before. It's something a bit new. And finally, talk about sponsorship and how it's something that without sponsorship, mentoring can only achieve so much. So who am I? What's my background? I'm originally from County Down, Newcastle, the Mournes, and I went to school in Down High and Downpatrick. I was very lucky that I had a well-informed careers teacher who helped guide me towards civil engineering. Nobody in my family comes from this background, and it was the fusion of geography, maths, physics and art that I wanted to bring together, and I was recommended to pursue a career in civil engineering. So stepped right into that space and went to Queen's and did 5 years there with a year out in industry. My personal life involves a great husband who's an accountant, again not an engineer, and I have a 3-year-old son at home, very excited about his new arrival. He's due any week now. And I'm also a very keen hockey player, so that's just a bit about me. Whenever I graduated Queen's, I moved on to Arup and spent my sort of last 10 to 12 years in major infrastructure projects. The A8, the A26 up near Ballymena, and the Conswater Community Greenway scheme, which hopefully some of you know in East Belfast, which is a great project. And I've also been very well connected to the Institution of Civil Engineers and been involved in a lot of STEM work and promoting the industry in general to the rest of our society to try and grow that. As well as my engineering and project management portfolio, I took on the role of equality, diversity and inclusion champion across our sub-region, and that involves me championing equality and diversity and inclusion for 900 staff and challenging the status quo, looking for new opportunities to improve our work environment and make us more inclusive. So within Arup, we define equality, diversity and inclusion as so on the screen, treating everybody fairly and with dignity and respect. Diversity about embracing everybody's different skills and how they can lead to a lot of innovation and things like that for our own clients. And also inclusion is about really allowing people to come to work and feeling that they can be their true selves in their work environment. So whenever I joined, or whenever I took on this role, it was 2017, and there were still a number of problems, and there still are some existing problems within our industry. Some on screen take you through about, there are people still experiencing gender discrimination. Again, a lot of our boards within construction sector still don't have any female representation, and also there are women in our industry who still feel that they're offered slightly less important roles than their male colleagues. So those are some of the issues that are still in existence, and we really want to try and overcome some of those. This is a graph that at the time of my appointment as EDI champion, this is the shape of our equality or our gender diversity. You can see it almost looks like a wine glass on its side. We sort of refer to it like that almost. And at that point, we didn't have a single female director in the West among 900 staff, which was quite shocking. We don't do too badly in the junior roles, and our graduate intakes were quite strong for female-male split. But it's really around that time, mid-career and senior leadership roles, where we really are performance falling apart. And I know that this isn't unique to Arup. It's a graph and demographic we see across the full industry. So I was really interested initially in running some mentoring schemes to try and help that female leadership pipeline, to try and strengthen that. And the first thing I thought about doing was mentoring. And the simplest definition I could find was a relationship between two people intended to help one of them develop or gain a particular skill. And we've all had lots of mentors in our lives, our parents, our guardians, a teacher, a coach, somebody in work. So I'm sure you can all think of a few people who have really helped steer you at those critical points in your lives or help you develop a skill. They can come in many forms. Classic mentoring involves a program which enables people who are in a position of influence to guide people or women in their career around pivotal decision points. And really, I would challenge any of you to name a successful person who has reached a particular position by themselves. You don't really get there alone. Everybody you can think of in presidential, politics, senior positions in your company, they've all had help. And that's something that is common across lots of different industries. It's also a way of knowledge transfer across some divisions, and also it means that mentors can keep in contact with frontline staff and understand what's happening at that part of their business as well. So I've created a bit of a mentoring toolkit as to if you feel that mentoring is something that you feel you could benefit from, how you go about doing that. So you need to think about who is your ideal mentor. You need to be clear about what you want from that person. And for me, it's somebody who can unlock a particular development area or a specific challenge that you want to overcome. In my career, I've looked for mentors at really critical times around commercial issues, wanting to get a bit more information about finance systems. And it's really been a very clear definition as to, I really need help with this particular thing. And the next thing is about being brave and ask. I do find that when I speak to women, we're all a little bit polite and sit back sometimes and maybe wait to be asked, or, oh, I'm sure they'll come to me and that they'll give me that time whenever they're maybe not so busy. But, I think you don't need to be overly formal about it sometimes. It's just a bit of time, maybe an hour or a couple hours in a month, just to provide a little bit of extra one-to-one advice, and the relationship can evolve from there. Set your expectations early. Anyone whose advice you're after is likely to be under a lot of demands on their own time, so make sure you value their time highly. And given that learning is a key underlying purpose of mentorship, articulating what you would like to get out of that relationship early will help the relationship develop in a positive way and make use of their time most efficiently. Look beyond the obvious. When I was doing research into mentoring, it seems that women tend to mentor other women more frequently than men do, but given the scarcity of senior women in our industry, we sometimes need to think that actually men can be great mentors, and most of the best mentors I've had have been men. And actually, whenever you approach men to mentor you, they're actually delighted to and really excited that you've been asked. So don't make that assumption that they might not be interested or not be able to give you their time. And finally, if women, I really encourage you to mentor other women, even if you doubt what you offer. We've come very, very far beyond the idea that there's a cat fighting or a rivalry between women. That just doesn't really exist in my experience. And actually, the support that you can get and the guidance you can get from a woman who's been through something can be really powerful. I remember when I returned from my first maternity experience, I looked at women who were in, maybe had 2 or 3 kids and had a similar commute to me, and I was just like, how do they do that? And I eventually got up the courage to ask one of them, and they were delighted to sort of tell me some of their tips and tricks of how they sort of balance things. And that was mentoring, and now I work flexibly. I work 2 days at home and make sure that I can get FaceTime with my clients and my project team successfully. And it really has made me feel a lot more content as my family shape has changed over the years. So I'm now going to move on to reverse mentoring. The concept of walking a mile in somebody else's shoes isn't something that's unusual. People can think about that concept quite regularly, but it's not something that typically in the construction industry we've invested a lot of time in. And what I have done is initially created a pilot based on reverse mentoring that saw women educating leadership on some of the issues and the diversity barriers that they face, and really expose them to quite challenging dialogue that they would never have had access to previously. So the pilot involved 6 male mentees, and they were all director level, and they were mentored by 6 female junior or mid-level staff, and they met over 3 meetings over 3 months for open and honest conversations. It led to some really interesting outcomes, and we had to set some really important ground rules. Day one, we're dealing with men at the top of their game and who are used to dominating and chairing meetings, so we had to try and put in place a number of rules to stop them from slipping into dominant behaviours, and explaining what the sort of learning pathway was. So we defined expectations, made sure everybody understood what everyone was wanting to get out of it. We developed trust and an openness, and there was a confidentiality agreement between the parties. And transparency was really important. You know, people were exchanging stories and experiences through the mentoring scheme that really involved people being quite open and honest. So all of those things came together. And in order to avoid anybody sort of having an awkward silence or not really knowing how to start a conversation, we provided session themes and prompts, if you like, for people to start talking. So diversity, bridges and barriers was the first one. So people talked about positive discrimination, flexible working, recruitment, workplace perception. People were talking about work-life balance and how that could be improved, and what visibility and impact meant in the workplace. And then also about the future, so really trying to tap into some of the opportunities that the pairing saw to improve things. And what I really liked was a lot of the mentors, the female staff, set homework for their mentees. And they set them different challenges to try and improve the inclusion within their teams, which was quite nice. So I have a video to play here just in a second. This is something I get asked about all the time. So in order to try and capture how the learning path was experienced by both the mentee and the mentor, I commissioned a case study video with some of the participants of the pilot, so they can tell you in their own words how it impacted them and what positives they got out of it. So hopefully this will play.
When the idea of reverse mentoring was first raised with me, I hadn't come across it before.
So my thinking has changed with regard to viewing some of the directors and associate directors are just as normal people as well, and they've just as imperfect as everyone else.
What I got out of it, quite frankly, was an opportunity to actually sit and focus on this important matter, because it is always around us, but we never actually give it a name and sit and talk about it.
I really came away with the view that just assuming that processes will allow a change in how we're behaving around females progressing through their business and progress in Arup, we do need to be active in addressing that issue.
As a white middle-aged male operating in the construction industry, we can be a bit scared about having conversations with, say, women who are on maternity leave. So I suppose it emboldened me to have meaningful conversations with people.
It's definitely helped me embrace new challenges and new opportunities with more determination than I may have done before. Definitely opened my eyes into how I approach things and how I could approach things more positively in the future.
One of the things that stuck with me that we discussed was how women sometimes get drawn into more managerial admin type tasks. My mentee also realized that as a manager, he was asking more women to do that, and sometimes it pulled them away from the technical side of things.
It gave me a different insight into how Arup looks from different people's eyes, and I think from that viewpoint I can only see a positive impact on the business going forward.
When we got going, when the sessions got going, I really enjoyed it. I definitely learnt a lot.
When we don't know each other, we revert to type in our perception of people. When we do know each other, we forget our ages and our genders and our races and religions, and we become two individuals.
So hopefully you found that insightful. I know that hearing from the horse's mouth is sometimes difficult to better, so I thought it was quite useful to have that. And one of the really great things that came out of that pilot was we now have widened it to all our directors and associate directors in my sub-region, but it's actually gone a lot more global than that. And as I say, it's one of the things I'm contacted about more often than not. And we don't just leave it where they meet for these 3 sessions and that's it, done. Some of the people have chosen to continue the relationships in a sort of an informal way. And we've been able to capture a lot of the learning and the issues that have been raised. And the themes that come out of that are actually shaping some of the wider initiatives that we're running around flexible working and some of the other opportunities that we can try and enhance inclusion in the company. So I just want to talk about sponsorship. It's a term that we don't use that often, so I want to explain what I mean by it. It's really about having somebody in your corner who is looking out for you and batting for you, if you like, and they can sometimes be somebody who can open up doors that maybe your mentor can't do. So it's somebody who believes in you, and it's a very specific person who's in a position of power or influence. And Belinda touched on it in her discussion about an advocate for you. And it's also somebody who can help open doors, suggest you for roles, be in those important meetings that actually talk about promotions or who are we going to get to do that project. Oh, well, the person in my mind could do that. So it's somebody that goes beyond what a mentor does. And just to sort of put the two up beside each other, a mentor talks with you, but a sponsor talks about you. And actually both of them can be really powerful depending on what you're trying to achieve at that moment in time. An interesting thing as well is that mentors don't really need anything back from you. They're giving you their advice, they're giving you tools and techniques to sort of develop, whereas a sponsor is really going out on a limb for you. So they're looking for something back in return, and they're looking for you to perform because they are giving your name their backing. So if this is something you think that you could benefit from, how do you find one? They can be quite hard to find. Ideally, it would be a mentor that you already have or a line manager who you already have a relationship with. But because that's the easiest way to sort of build on that. But if your line manager isn't in that particular level of influence that you maybe think you need to access to sort of unlock some of the opportunities that you want, you maybe need to look at identifying senior members of staff that could potentially be in those spaces and try to get to know them a bit better. And the best way that I have found in the past is letting the sponsor see you in action. It all sounds a little bit sort of contrived or sort of pre-prepared, but how will that person know how good you are if you don't show them or don't talk about it? So this could be in the form of a presentation or just letting them know what a client said about you. And it does feel a little bit self-promoting, but we're not, as women, we don't tend to be as good at that than as men. I've asked those questions a couple of times to leaders. Do men promote themselves personally differently? And there's always a nod, generally. So whenever you create this relationship, it means that you can ask them a few more questions and challenge the status quo, going, well, why did Brian get that job over me? Or, oh, I didn't know you wanted that type of career, and that can start to actually help the sponsor see what type of pathway you want. And if you don't speak up or ask sometimes it can be very difficult for leaders to actually know what your ambitions are and what roles you would like to see unlocked. So that's another really key one about being brave and asking again. Final thoughts. I just wanted to sort of summarise and bring it all together at the end and sort of sum up what I think and how mentoring and sponsorship has played a role in my career. At the moment, I'm associate in Arup in Belfast. I'm 2 grades above the next senior women in my office, and I suppose you're seen as a bit of a role model, reluctant role model, if you like. But reflecting on it, it has been about great leaders have looked after me, and I've been a bit bold sometimes and asked for things, going, well, why is it done that way? So I would encourage you all to be a bit more confident and be a bit braver and ask, what's the worst that can happen? And if you have any questions about reverse mentoring or anything like that, obviously we can maybe take 1 or 2 questions after this, but I'm about for the rest of the day, so please feel free to ask me about it.